serving as the direct upgrade to our ever-loved Warbonnet, and finally making his grand re-debut from the somewhat controversial Season 3 of the Metabots anime, and of course Metabots 3 and 4. It is KLN01 Unitris, debuting with the kit of Heater Plant, Rifle, Gatling, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Gunman, which passively buffs the heat stat of all equipped shooting parts on the build. Now naturally, being a KLN type akin to Warbonnet or even Meisai Maran, which is his upgrade, he very much likes to stay with the same conventional and all-around balanced kit that his predecessor before offered, but with a little bit of a twist. Heater Plant, of course, is a passive buff that you can put on the team and on the center plant as a passive. What it does is passively boost the heat stat of himself and all equipped all allies on the field by a passive amount every turn as they complete their actions. Right arm and left arm of Gatling. Rifle and Gatling are honestly still pretty conventional as well, offering no real drawback or debuff in terms of using them, so very solid, very well balanced shooting skills all the same. But the leg ability of Gunman does honestly bolster this even more so, which means that he's going to have a little bit easier of a time running to the line in order to use either of his skills and pretty much resort to taking pot shots all the same. But I do also have to kind of break him down for a minute too, as he's packing a very solid kit all the same as well. A little over 3,600 HP for his head, about 3,300 per arm, about 3,550 HP for his legs. Means he can definitely take a hit and keep on kicking without anything really holding him back or crippling him too easily. A base power of almost 1,600 honestly puts him on par, if not higher, than Warbonnet's basic rifle, which, for the sake of mentioning, is the strongest basic rifle in the game, with a base power similar to that of the weakest power rifle currently available in the game. Of course, Gatling, with a scattered AoE, means its damage will be spread relatively evenly and thinly to one part and the two others at random at 1/3 your damage, but he is still packing some pretty solid stats between them. About a success stat of 1,300 for his right arm means he's almost never going to miss unless in super rare situations. With his left arm maybe hurting just a little bit, however, but with the Gatling skill, that is kind of to be expected to a degree. His leg stats are honestly looking pretty nice too. His melee resist at 679 isn't necessarily all that great, unfortunately, as it means that anyone incoming with melee attacks or high damaging melee nuking, he's going to be really hurting a lot from that. But with the shoot resist, however, of 1229, he can definitely take pot shots from afar without anything easily crippling him. An evade of 973 puts him just a tier lower than his counterpart X-Size, but not enough to really put him in a whole separate and lower class. And of course, with a mobility of 888, pretty much speaks for itself that it will be a very high speed and high running leg. Pretty much can be used just about anywhere, especially on dedicated shoot fighters all the same. As Unitris is also capable of a meta change form where he especially will amp up his power more so than say X-Size would with his. And with this case, he trades Heater Plant for Cooler Plant, which will instead of passively buffing the heat stat, instead buff the cooldown stat across the board for himself and all his allies. He will trade his rifle out for Power Rifle, which will get you a times 1.5 damage bonus relative to your as long as your legs are intact. But of course, since Unitris while in this mode is only one form, he will always have that no matter what, which is a very nice addition to him. And then, of course, he will trade his Gatling attack for Giga Gatling, which will get the same times 1.5 damage bonus as Power Rifle and Mega Gatling, but also introduce Defense Ignore on top of that for even higher damage output than it could before, which is essentially a very well-balanced trade-off in comparison to what he had before. In this mode, he also does change his legs from biped to wield, and his leg ability from gunman to forester, which will grant him an S rank in forest terrain in addition to the leg standard matches. And this is where he really starts cooking to a point, in trade of a little bit of damage reduction in armor. In this case, wheeled legs naturally will have the highest mobility in the game, at the cost of only being good on 2 terrains at best if you include cyber. But with the forester leg ability, that gives him an additional one that he can maintain his high speed on without anything really slowing him down. The trade-off to this, however, is that if you do look at his stats, they do actually drop significantly by a point, with the exception of his mobility, which does go up. In this case, his melee resist will drop from about the 600s down to about the mid 500s, which makes him even more so susceptible to incoming melee attacks. His shoot resist will drop significantly as well to just shy of 1,000 in comparison to where he was at closer to 1,200 or 1,300. And of course, his evade also will drop slightly to about 879, which still isn't bad, needless to say. But it means it will be a little harder for him to dodge a lot of skills, whereas he could originally while in biped form. But he is still packing a lot of very solid hit power across the board to make up for it, which for this reason actually rounds him out and makes him pretty well balanced, pretty much like Excise does to a degree. So for these reasons, I do have to rate him a pretty solid 9 out of 10 for what he offers. A very conventional balance between your conventional shooting with rifle and Gatling to his dedicated shooting with power rifle and Giga Gatling, given that he can maintain both of these very easily, and especially a leg ability that can tie into that even more so in the situations that it can call for. For these reasons as well, as mixed parts, I would rate him at about an 8 out of 10. Given the fact that his rifle and his Gatling are pretty much on, or his rifle at least, is pretty much on tier with Warbonnet, which pretty much speaks for itself over how good and how handy it can be, even if it is a heavy part, but he can make up for it very easily with his parts being conventionally balanced and very easily used anywhere across the board, especially for dominant shooting support and shooting fighters all the same.